Why does the soul need to have physical experience?
Why soul needs to have physical experience? Why do we go to movies? We don't need to. Why do we love movies? Why do we love drama? It is a natural thing for consciousness to be conscious of something. It's a natural thing. The nature of consciousness is not nature of you, me, soul, or anybody. Nature of our totality. That consciousness has to be conscious to exist. Its existence, to call it consciousness means it is conscious of something. And that something is called creation. Therefore, it's not that once upon a time there was a creator sitting alone. He said, now let me create. That's not the truth. The truth is the creator-creation are a continuous thing. The creator-creation. If we understand that the creator is consciousness, then consciousness and that to be conscious of existed simultaneously all the time. So that is why to be conscious of something, that means to be creative, is natural to consciousness. All levels of experiences, not necessarily physical. There are so many experiences, amazing experiences. The first experience, which is automatic and generated by consciousness, is the experience of the one and the many in one. Difficult to understand here, but it's an experience in our true home, in totality. Total consciousness is consciousness and units of consciousness inside. The units of consciousness we call souls, and consciousness we call creator. What was the need for consciousness to have the many to start with? Physical comes much later. The need was to make its true nature, the true nature of consciousness per se, was love, total knowledge, total bliss, true nature. If that were not the true nature of consciousness, I would not be interested in going to totality. The true nature is so beautiful. The total love, total bliss, total awareness, total knowledge. That's big goal. It appeals to my consciousness here. Therefore, we set our goal on our true home based upon the nature of our totality. Now, if the nature of totality is, say, love, it does not make it an experience of love. It is love. When you have the many, it becomes an experience of love. People become lovers and beloveds, as souls, as units. Within totality, you can experience so much love. Experience. The experience is not generated till the many is created. People ask, why were many souls created? That's the reason. That the many has made something that was innate in consciousness into an experience. Once that has happened, it can be expanded further. The expansion of experience, the word expansion I am using, is itself, as we understand it, expansion into space and time. That's the biggest expansion that can take place. So, a little equipment we add to ourselves by creating it, called the human mind, or mind itself, or universal mind. A machine that can generate and make the illusion of time and space into real experience. It's a wonderful thing. The many who are in totality now experience an expansion of experience through the mind. That's beautiful, wonderful opportunity to go so vast that we can go wherever we like. And how do we experience? How do we experience? Consciousness can experience in many ways. How does it experience? The first experience of love is completely indescribable. It's a great pull. Pull that holds you together and also keeps you separate at the same time. Beautiful. How does it work when time and space are created? It still pulls us within that. Everything pulls each other. Everything, objects, people, animals, everything created is attracting each other. People are trying to understand gravity. They haven't understood. If they go there, they'll understand gravity is just the pull at the mental state first created, at universal mind. When you see that universal mind copies, it's creative as something to work in now, time and space. It works the same principle as the original totality. Totality individuated itself to make souls. The mind individuates itself to make individual minds. So the experiences, mental experiences, become many because of the many minds. Great development, greater experience. Perception is being done through the mind. Consciousness is conscious through time and space, through the mind, and is perceiving what is creating. Wonderful. It's a great experience. To enlarge the experience further, perception, which is experience of what has been created, divided into sense perceptions. That means separate seeing from hearing. It wasn't there before. At the mental level is one perception. Mind perceives total. But the sense perceptions divided. Very useful for making the experience into a reality. Because by sense perceptions, we can then use these different sense perceptions to touch, to see, and say it's real. And cut off the remaining experience, how we generated it. Cut off our experience of our origin. Cut off all the knowledge and just make this. What a beautiful reality we create out of consciousness. That consciousness can create a reality so beautifully and divide it into sense perceptions. It's a remarkable thing. We can fly, we have perceptions. In the sky, we can go where we like, we can see what we like. To congeal this experience, as it were, we come up with a physical level of experience where it looks like these powers of perception are now working through an individuated physical being, like this human body we are having. It's the process that has come down to this level, that we can now experience the reality in this level. How many levels we've come down in order to become human beings? Should we keep on going further? Should we now develop more dream-like states, go another 6, 7 levels? We could have. And perhaps we have. Right now, we are at that physical level. At some point, we must develop means to go back if we like. After all, we are generating an experience and moving away from our origin and generating experience of duality. That means pairs of opposites, pain and pleasure, happiness and unhappiness, light and sound, light and darkness, sound and quiet. We are developing everything in pairs of opposites. Matter and antimatter. Everything has opposites today in physical plane. So therefore, when this is developed, we must have some arrangement. We can't go on hiding ourselves so far. We can't lock ourselves completely out of our own true home and leave the key inside. At least we should have the key with us to go back if we like. We were super intelligent enough at all levels to keep the key with us. But we allowed the key to work at a certain point in this devolution of experiences, and that happened to be the physical human level. It could be any level. In our decision, the totality of consciousness decided that the level at which we can apply the key to go back into our home should be at the physical human level. It did not say physical level, because physical level, you can have animals and insects and birds and all forms of life around us. Lot of life around us. But a small part of that life, which we call human life, we place the key to go back here. To work the key, that it does actually work in the lock, a unique method was invented, beautiful method, and that was to give us the experience as if we have free will, that we can make a decision. Not that we are born and we just drift and we live, like all other life forms are living. There are trees outside, they are born, they grow, they die. Insects are born, grow and die. Birds are born, grow and die. Animals are born, grow and die. Angels are born and grow and die, if you go and see them. So-called gods that are running the universes are born, go and die. Human beings don't. Human beings say, should I do it or not? Should I die or not die? Should I live or not live? Should I do this or not that? This element of choice given to a human being was a remarkable discovery, remarkable invention, I call it, that you could have an experience of free will as if you are the decision maker, whereas you are not the decision maker at this level at all. If the life has been set for all forms of life in advance, it's also set for us. From birth to death, our life is predicted. I have met many people in my life who made great predictions about what will happen, and it happened. How could they make a prediction if the thing that they say will happen has not already happened? It's not that they are creating the new condition, they are able to see it. There was a Swami in India, and he used to have visions. And the visions were always correct. But he had no control over the visions. I had many meetings with Swami. And he said he has no control, but the visions come and he can see things. Amongst many visions, he predicted that a South Indian person will become the Prime Minister of India, when the Swami was only a young boy in a village in Rajasthan, and Narasimha Rao was the person whom he told, and he became Prime Minister, which was unexpected. All Prime Ministers were from North India. But he had a vision that this man who's come to see him is sitting in the Prime Minister chair. This Swami became a friend of mine. I used to talk to him. When Gore and George Bush were fighting in the United States for presidency, and Gore was leading in votes, I said, who will become president? He said, I had a vision. George Bush will be your president. And I said, are you sure? He said, I've seen him at his, that's the word Swami used. I have seen him at his coronation. There's no coronation in America. I said, Swami doesn't know about it. He said, I have seen him in his coronation. Later on, the whole tie was left to Florida votes. And Florida, when the vote had, the Florida Supreme Court ruled Gore to be the winner. I called the Swami. I was in America. I called the Swami in India. I said, Swamiji, wrong this time. This time Gore is leading. He said, George Bush is the president. I've seen him at his coronation. The Supreme Court of the country, by vote of 5-4, declared George Bush to be the president with a minority vote in the country. The Swami was right. George Bush appointed Dick Cheney as his transition officer and vice president. And I heard Dick Cheney, as transition officer, explaining the arrangements made for the inauguration. And he said, and thousands of people heard him say, we will have the coronation on that date. Use the word coronation. How does the Swami know? If this thing has not already happened, the Swami can't know it. There was a lady I met at Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship early on, maybe many years ago, she lived in a town called DeKalb in Illinois. And from birth, she used to have dreams of something that will happen later. And things would generally happen after a week. So she began to write a journal of her dreams. Every time she had a dream, she would write it down. And after a week, 10 days, 15 days, things would happen. And she would mark them. This actually happened. And she was very right. And she couldn't explain where it's coming from. It's a dreamlike state. When she met me at the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship meeting, I had giving a talk, she was also giving a talk. She was impressed by my telling that these things are fixed and they are all predetermined. That is why how you can see them. So she realized that's what she was doing. Became a friend. And she said, I want to come and spend some time with you. I said, I am an immigrant. I had just come from India. But I am working with two friends of mine who have given me a small job. And we have a small office. If you don't mind, you can come and meet me in my office in Chicago area. And she said, certainly I'll come. So we decided that on a certain date, she will come to see me. 1 week before she was to see me, she had a dream. She had a dream that she was sitting in the lobby of a 5-star hotel, and a stretch limousine, big black stretch limousine comes, and I get out of it. And I greet her. She said, this little immigrant fellow, how can he get out of a stretch limousine? This time I might be wrong. Even she thought so. Because she has seen me, poor fellow, coming from India and giving a talk in one meeting. And people are trying to support me. How can we take care of this little fellow come from India after retirement from jobs? So she said, this time I could be wrong, but she recorded the dream in the journal. One day before she was to come, my partners in business told her, we are not going to meet in the office, we will meet in that 5-star hotel, which she had seen in the dream, which surprised her. She went to the hotel and waited in the lobby, and few days before she came, my partners and I, we had made good money selling cookies, but healthy cookies. They sold well. She was surprised when we came up in the stretch limousine. I got out. As soon as I get out, she walked to me with a journal in her hand. This is my dream. And she had recorded it 1 week earlier. I can tell you so many situations, so many people have had these experiences of being able to see the future, sometimes just a glimpse of it. During my service, at one time I was in charge of a district as a district collector, deputy commissioner they used to call it, in Kangra district headquarters, Dharamsala, where I had a chance to receive the Dalai Lama also. And I heard that a few miles down from Dharamsala lives a famous astrologer whose name is Vidya, but since he lives in a town called Gagal, he's called Gagal Jyotshi, the Gagal astrologer. And my predecessors always had to leave some notes for the future administrators to come and read how to administer the district. When I was reading the notes of one older British officer recorded in the journal in my office, he said, there is a man named Gagal Jyotshi, Gagal astrologer. You should go and see him because he can tell you the future. He can tell you anything. A British officer writing this. And he recorded something so interesting. He said, I informed the commissioner of the division about this man. The commissioner could not believe that any man can tell you what's happening anywhere in the world and what will happen in future. Therefore, commissioner said, I'd like to see him. And this is recording in the journal. The commissioner invited, he was so convinced, he said, we should let the Governor General and Viceroy of the country know it. There is a man like this available. So they informed the then Viceroy of India, the Governor General, a British guy, that we have a strange man here who can tell you anything. He has a way of reciting some shlokas in Sanskrit. When he recites them, his mind goes somewhere else and he can speak up things that you can never imagine. The Governor General said, bring him over. And they took him to New Delhi. This Gagal Jyotchi went to New Delhi and met the Viceroy. Viceroy said, what can you tell me? And he was trying to recite those shlokas and said, Viceroy, you have 3 brothers in London right now. Is that right? He said, anybody can read my biography. It's not a big deal you're telling me. Tell me something that nobody knows. And he recited those words, and suddenly in a trance-like state, he said, your wife, Viceroy, is right now cutting an apple in the house. This was a little surprise. And the Viceroy called his house. Honey, what are you doing right now? I'm just having some fruit. What fruit are you having? Are you cutting some fruit? Yes, I'm cutting an apple. This is all recorded in the journal of the collector's office, deputy commissioner's office in Kangra. I read it. I was very impressed. I would like to see that guy also. I had a plan to go and see my commissioner, who was in a town called Jalandhar, in one side. Just as I packed up my jeep and loaded my luggage, and my wife said, I'll also come along with you. I said, okay, you come. I got a call from the commissioner. He's not available. He has to go somewhere. Cancelled. Meeting cancelled. I'd already packed up everything. I said, okay to the driver. Okay, no Jalandhar. We are going to go to Palampur and I'll make a visit somewhere else. Another direction altogether. And I said, I'll stop with that Gagal Jyotchi on the way, that astrologer. I went there. And he was reciting those verses. And he said, you came to go in one direction, going in the other. I said, this guy knows something. Very impressive. My wife was also impressed. She told her father, there is a man like this who can tell things. He said, I don't believe it. The father is also a disciple of great master, initiated by him. He says, we are satsangis. We know this is not the right thing to do, even if he is doing it. These are riddhis and siddhis. People can control through yogic practices these powers, psychic powers called riddhis and siddhis. This man has controlled some riddhis and siddhis. And nothing to worry. We are not into that. These are lower chakras. We are higher up. But he came to visit me. And I said, would you like to meet that guy? He said, the guy who has controlled his riddhis and siddhis? Okay, let's go. I drove to Gagal Jyotchi with my wife and a couple of other friends also. And when we went there, he was reciting the shlokas. He had his eyes closed. In the middle of the shlokas, when we were sitting, they made us sit there waiting for him to wake up from his trance. While repeating the shlokas, he said, okay, you think I am controlling riddhis and siddhis, have you controlled your wife? My father-in-law was so alarmed. And he began to repeat. He said, this may be negative power. He began to repeat the 5 words given by Grandmaster. And that man in his stage began to repeat the 5 words. You think these 5 words are going to change it? Amazing experience. And then after a while, he opened his eyes. Oh, you are here. Welcome. I said, how did you know 5 words? He said, what 5 words? He had no idea whatsoever. He had no idea what he said. He had no idea he could predict these things. Therefore, the point being made is, if these things were not already there, you couldn't speak about it. Nobody could. If it was really totally free will, we would decide the future, and future cannot be predicted. The future has been predicted again and again. Therefore, there is no real free will in the sense that you are actually making a choice. But the experience of free will is real. How is it enforced? By ignorance. Ignorance of the future. Simple device. Here human beings are blessed to have the key by which they can open the door to their true home, and they have to be given a device of free will. And free will cannot be generated when the whole thing is already created. Therefore, make them ignorant of the future, and they will feel we have real free will. That's how free will operates here. But it's very useful. It is the key. If we did not have free will, we could never seek anything. The seeking comes from free will. Should I not? Am I right in doing it or not? These things happen along with our mind. Mind is searching for answers. Soul is seeking for the truth. Soul is always seeking for going back when we are ready for it. If we are not ready, we are enjoying the experience, lifetime after lifetime. When we are ready, the soul uses this key of seeking. When it seeks, if it seeks its true home, a perfect living master appears in the life of that human being. It's as simple as that. Very good, well prearranged method to open the lock and go back home. A great device made at this 6th physical level. Good level, could be made anywhere, but I am only telling you the pattern which has been developed so beautifully. It's the most beautiful structure that you can see what you call creation. It's perfect. If you look at part of it, it's imperfect. If you see totality of creation, it's perfect. That is why perfection can only be seen from totality, not from part of it. Whenever we come into divided areas, a division was necessary to create the many. When we divide, then perfection goes away, and we look at the analytical side and can't see the whole, imperfect. When we say that master is perfect living master, the word perfect is used in that sense, that he has experience above the mind into perfection. And therefore, he is perfect in awareness. He is living as a human being, like us. A master because he has come to take us back home. Period. But why is it necessary to have a living master then? What about a perfect master who's passed away, died, but left a message for us? Okay, you can believe me, you can follow me, now I'll help you. Let me make this very clear. Except for a living person who comes into our life, anything else that we assume, either a dead master or other higher powers, ascended master sitting in Tibet or mountains, or birds or natural creatures, or angels or gods, are all concoctions of the mind, all made up by our mind. There is no other way to make them up. That is why when we say, I am following a master who's passed away, you are following the mind. When a person says, I follow nature, you're following the mind. Somebody says, I follow gods that I worship, you're following the mind. These are all mental creations which we create. A living person can tell us, no, these gods, these angels, these masters never tell us that. Never tell us no. A living person tells us no. We are living people. Therefore, the arrangement to get back has been made in such a way that a living person comes in our life, ascended with knowledge, with awareness, and works while he is alive. Therefore, masters have themselves said that you need a living master to get this key to work, to go back to your true home. We have heard of Sheikh Farid, a perfect master. Sheikh Farid is mentioned several times in Sri Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book of the Sikhs. They didn't say that he was a Muslim or Hindu, he was a Muslim. So what? He was a master, perfect master, living master. His master's name was Qutbuddin, Sheikh Qutbuddin. And Farid would tell his son, Qutbuddin has become getting old. Please get initiated from him and save your soul. Help yourself. And the son would say, Dad, I am still young. I have to look at life and I am running around. Please, when time comes, I will get initiated. And Farid would tell him again and again, Son, Master is getting old. Please get initiated while he is alive. And he would put it off. One day, Qutbuddin died. Sheikh Qutbuddin died, and his body is lying there before their burial can take place. And the son heard that Qutbuddin, the Sheikh, had died. He ran and shaved his head, which used to be customary for getting initiation from a master, and he put his head, shaven head, on the feet of the dead body of Qutbuddin. Said, initiate me. And standing there, his father, Farid, who had been asked by Qutbuddin to continue his work, he says, my son, this is not the master. This is the body of the master. A perfect living master is one who can hold your hand. That Sheikh alone can help you, who will hold your hand while he is alive and tell you, even 1 second later is no good. He made it clear. It has been explained so many times. As human beings, we want to open the key to the highest level of consciousness, and as a human being appears with that level. The rest is all our mind. Our mind is very creative, very active, and can make up all kinds of things. And we develop religions based upon masters who have gone away. We develop institutions based upon masters gone away and think something will happen. Very often they become into business houses, more interested in collection than donation than money, more than spirituality. Spirituality disappears. Outside constructions of buildings, outside things continue to happen more. So this is something very important to know. Why we say perfect living master. A perfect living master is a necessity if you want to open the key to your totality. But if you want to hear some nice discourses and some nice lectures and get peace of mind, you can go to anybody. That's a different matter altogether. But it's a very important point. The need you should examine. Why it's necessary. Only human being who is like yourself can guide you. If he's not like you, even then he can't guide you. If he's too far removed from you in terms of not being human, superhuman, he can't guide you. He has to be at the same level. It's remarkable how when these masters have come, how they have adjusted themselves. When they talk to poor people, they act like they're poor people. When they talk to rich people, they talk like rich people. When they talk to intellectuals, they come up with intellectual stuff. When they talk to simple folks from the villages, they talk like the village people. This adaptability in those human beings is remarkable. I've been watching this. I'm watching Great Master, how he was able to adjust himself to exactly who he was talking to. So this particular thing is of great importance, that how perfect living masters have to be human. Why did we need to come physical experience? Because of the nature of consciousness and we designed it so beautifully. It is not a necessity. It is not necessary to create a physical experience. You could create any other experience. No, we have created other experiences also. Physical is a very small experience. You go inside and see how many other experiences are available. We have created so many experiences, such a variety of them, unlimited experiences, all lying within your knowing by going within yourself. This is just one, not a bad one. If you treat it like an experience, not like my life, I am living a bad life, I am caught up in my karma. Karma was merely designed as a means of linking events together. Because this life was nothing more than events placed upon a timeline. Timeline was created first, events were thrown upon it, linked together, cause and effect. That's karma. There's nothing special about it, just a method of going through events. Life is nothing more than going through events, and they get linked to one cause and effect. When we add a dimension, a mental dimension called the moral dimension, we divide those events. It's an artificial division, but we divide it good and bad. Actions, good and bad. The result, according to the law of cause and effect, good, you get rewarded. Bad, you get punished. Just a means of setting up a good drama. And we set up very nicely. So sit inside on a comfortable chair and watch the drama. Don't get so involved in it.